Today's episode features terrifying sightings of unexplained creatures in Oklahoma, so get ready for some beasties. Remember to send me your stories at darkstories.org so I can narrate them. Check out eeriecast.com for more terrifying shows. Also, we've hit the Halloween contest entry limit, so until further notice, I cannot accept any new contest entries. That's awesome that so many people submitted their stories. Thank you. Also, here's the comment of the day from a previous episode titled 4 Disturbing Sightings of Not Deer. A viewer by the name of Doodles says, "Deern't." Well, they're completely right. Deer they are not, and that's about all I have to say about it. But it got a chuckle out of me, so I had to reply to it. Leave a comment in this video, and if it's interesting enough, I might reply to it in a future episode. Now, let's begin. Oklahoma Crawler from Gabe Z. I live in Oklahoma near a busy road that a year back got insanely flooded. That road was almost completely covered and had to be detoured. But the dirt road leading out of our property had basically become a river. Mom said it was too dangerous to cross, and I was inclined to believe her. I even checked it out myself walking down the driveway till I could see this new quote-unquote river. It was so loud as the water rushed by I could barely hear myself think. I remember thinking, if anyone fell in there, they'd be lucky if they didn't get swept away. This river lasted over the next week. During that time, Mom had me walk down the west side of the hill toward an old convenience store. The folks that ran that place were flooded in too, and told us to take what we needed free of charge. I was grateful, but we were sure to take only what Mom and I needed, and we paid them back once the flood lowered. The couple of times I went to and from the convenience store, I'd walk along those rushing waters. Not too close that I was at risk of falling in, but close enough to sort of enjoy listening to it and watching it. I was a bored high school-aged kid, stranded by a flood for a few days. Of course I was going to get bored. Well, one day on my way back from my second trip for some milk and eggs, I saw something that had been swept up in the floodwaters. I swear I thought it was some kid. A small person splashing about and choking on the water, loud enough that I could hear it over the rapids. My heart raced, and I dropped my grocery bag by a tree. Then I ran over to the edge of the water. The figure looked pale. I began to panic. I had no idea what to do in this situation. I doubted I could do anything at all, and yet judging by the person's skin, they were near death. I remember screaming out for help. I even dialed my mom on my phone, but she didn't pick up. I was struggling to decide if I should dial 911, as I stood there helplessly trying to decide, my hands clutching my scalp. This person latched onto some roots sprouting from the ground after, by chance, being swept closer to the edge of the water. As it crawled back up onto land, I took a few steps closer. I soon realized what I'd been watching nearly drown had never been an actual person at all. In fact, I had no idea what I was actually looking at. The creature before me had a human shape to it, with extremely thin limbs, pale gray skin that was almost light blue, veins like spiderwebs all over its body, bald head and eyes solid white, no pupil that I could see. At first I didn't think it had ears because I couldn't find any, but as I sort of leaned my head to the side for a better look, I saw these spiral-like holes on the sides of its head. Basically, they were like inverted ears. As I observed it, the creature coughed up water. Floodwater splashed onto the grass with each nasty-sounding retch. When I took another step closer, curious and partly wanting to make sure this really wasn't just a terribly mangled person, the creature half hissed, half choked at me. I saw its teeth then, like human teeth that had been filed down to rough points. Its mouth was wider than a person's too, the edges of which stretched past its cheekbones. Overall, it just reminded me of a person if you took every aspect of them and dialed the knob back a bit towards a more animalistic direction. Then, when it was done hacking up dirty water, it began to scurry away. It used its hands and feet to move more like a giant pale spider than a person, and it moved with precision and speed. Humans look funny when we try to run on all fours because we aren't built that way, but this thing looked so natural with its exit that it gave me chills. It could outrun me that way if it wanted to. As the creature disappeared into the thickness of trees, I regained control of myself, having been dumbfounded by the sight of something so, disturbing. I grabbed my grocery bag and ran home a little faster that day. This ain't one of those stories where I continued to see it or saw it come to my window or anything like that. That's the end to my experience. I saw something weird on a walk home after a flood, and my view of what exists in this world has changed ever since. Bigfoot on the River, from Imnotamoose. This is a true story told to me by my grandmother a few years ago. I had brought up Bigfoot as a topic and showed her the famous Ohio howl. She snapped to attention in fierce recognition and said, "I heard that one time when me and your grandpa were fishing on the river." It happened down in southeastern Oklahoma, west of Broken Bow Lake, when my grandparents decided to go catfishing in a spot we'll call the Big Hole. This was their favorite place to catch catfish, as the depth of the river allowed for bigger fish than what was normal. And so after a long drive into the woods, they picked their place along the bank and set up their gear. Sitting on the bank, they were enjoying the nice time period between sundown and nighttime, feeling the cool air from the water cooling them off from the fleeting sun's rays. That's when they heard what was described as a yell from upriver. Now it's at this point I have to say that my grandmother is a sweetheart, but in some situations, she lacks some common sense, as when she heard the yell, the first thing she did was to mimic it. They went back and forth between each other for about a minute, before it stopped, and she thought that was the end of it. Hours pass, and sometime around midnight, they hear the same yell again, only it's closer and louder than before. If you're wondering whether she tried to mimic the yell again, the answer is yes, and again it was a back and forth. However, this time when it stopped, there was silence for a while. Suddenly, an enormous splash came from just up the river. After the first splash, there was another, and another, until they realized it was rocks being thrown into the water, steadily coming closer with every throw. My grandfather decided that he'd had enough and started to pack everything they brought, telling my grandma to go start the truck that was sitting at the top of the embankment. Once she got to the top, she froze at the trailhead because she could see a dark figure in the trees standing next to the truck, yards from where she was. This figure was taller than the truck by at least a foot or more, and easily towered over her. She could hear this thing breathing heavily, not in a tired way, but more aggressive, as if to say, "I know you're here, but I own this land, and you aren't welcome." Right then and there, my grandma made the smartest decision of the night and walked right back down the bank to my grandpa so she wouldn't have to be alone with that thing. When she got back down there, he asked her why she hadn't started the truck, but all she said was, "Let me help you and I'll tell you later." They finished packing and now had to return to the truck, but once they got there, there was no sign of that thing she had seen. Relieved, they hopped in and sped out of there as quickly as possible. In the truck, she told him of the figure she saw by the truck, and the two of them swore they would never go back. To this day, they still haven't, and now that the roads going there are all blocked off by the Forestry Service, I doubt they ever will. I marveled at her story because not only was she someone who didn't make up tales, she was also a very experienced woodswoman and had accompanied my grandpa on many hunting and fishing ventures. So to say she knew about the animals that should and shouldn't be in the forest would be an understatement. Oklahoma Encounters, written by an anonymous 4chan user. You can choose to believe this or not. The story is set over a period of 20 years. I lived in a small rural area in Oklahoma, between Tulsa and Bartlesville. The county had been experiencing weird sightings of black triangles and cloaked people walking down rural roads. Cows were disappearing, and viscera was being found in fields. At the time, I lived on a ranch that had livestock. I was 14 years old. I was chilling at the house one night during the summer playing Super Nintendo. This was around early 1996, so the Nintendo 64 was not yet released. The game room was a sunroom that overlooked land, and in the distance, if it was clear, you could see the Tulsa skyline that was about 30 miles away. I got up to go get an RC Cola. I walked into the sunroom and saw what looked to be people by our pool on the bottom of the hill. Mind you, our house was built on a hill to overlook our land. Oh crap, I thought. My little brothers were out again, trying to swim at night. I left the sunroom and proceeded to go out to the back deck. I began walking downstairs to the pool at the bottom of the hill. I noticed these figures were smaller and skinnier than my brothers. I saw a baseball bat on the staircase landing halfway down, so I grabbed it, and I could feel my adrenaline pulsing. The walk toward the pool felt like forever. I tried to say something to the figures, but barely a word got out. But they definitely heard me. They turned around and stared at me. They had these large eyes and gray skin. I began to hear static in my head. I felt weird. I began counting them. 1, 2, there were 4 of them. I tried to raise the bat, but my arms suddenly felt like jelly. I heard what seemed like distant whispers in my head. "We're not here to hurt you, unless you try to hurt us." I start to feel like I'm congested. I begin to slowly walk towards them in the pool. My bat is raised. I'm thinking I can get a good swing in on them. I try to swing at the creature nearest me, but I miss, and I'm beginning to feel weak. I sat down, ready to accept what happens. I hear footsteps on the concrete around the pool, and I hear the gate move. I look around. The figures are walking away. I see light from the TV in the sunroom. I see one of my younger brothers in his pajamas lit up by the light from the TV. I just sit there for a few minutes as I regain my strength. Slowly, I walk up back to the house and I can feel warmth on my face. My nose is bleeding. I walk to the bathroom when I get back inside. Washing my face off, I contemplate on waking my dad and stepmother up. My younger brother walks up behind me and says, "You saw them too? They've been coming around here for the last few months. That's why I draw the blinds when it's evening now. A few months back I was reading Hank the Cowdog, and I looked up. One of them was staring at me from my window. I felt a loud buzzing in my head and it just disappeared." I looked at him, and the dots of his odd behavior were adding up in my head. My brother continues, "They mostly walk around outside the windows and try to peek into the glass. They know we're here, but they're trying to mess with us." "Do Dad and Sue know?" I reply. Sue's the name of my stepmom. "No," he says. "I don't want to tell them. They might think I'm crazy." "Well, let's just keep it to ourselves, okay?" I head back to the sunroom and turn off the TV, then run back to my room, freaked out. I lay in my bed all night until the sunrise, unable to sleep, listening for any movement outside. When my father wakes me up, I told him that I wanted a rifle. His eyes lit up. "What for?" "I just want to plink and walk the land with it." "Of course. he says. We went to the tractor supply store and got a cheap SKS from a barrel and some ammo. Then, I figured, I was prepared for these guys if they showed up again. Weeks went by and nothing showed up. Until I was playing Quake on DOS. The computer room is in the front of the house. The room is a computer informal dining area with a window, with benches built right underneath it. The sun was going down in the Oklahoma sky, and my anxiety began to set in. I drew the blinds, and I played about an hour or so and began feeling odd. Specifically, there's a weird feeling on my back, and my back faced the window. I stopped playing my game for a second. I began listening to the sounds. I could hear a theme playing from my computer, but then I heard what sounded like movement in the bushes outside the window. I gathered some courage. Then I peeked behind the curtains. I saw two large, all-black eyes staring at me. Panic mode kicks in. I run from the window while yelling. My dad gets up, and I hear him running towards me. He comes into the room with a loaded 1911. "What is it?" he asks. "There's something outside," I tell him. He walks out the front door, and I hear, "Holy crap." He runs back in and locks all the doors, drawing the blinds all over the house. "Everyone to the office." We do as he says, and my dad walks in a few minutes later with a few sleeping bags and a few rifles with some food. Then I hear him trying to call his coworkers. My father is a deputy. He tries to call my stepmom, who's out of town for a conference, but there's no service. Dad comes in and rounds up all 5 of us. I have 4 brothers. He tells us that what is out there looks like a gray, and begins to explain to us what that is. He tells us all to stay in this room tonight. Dad randomly patrols the house while my brothers fall asleep. I fight it, but I end up passing out around 1:30. I wake up because I think I hear knocking at the window. I look around and see all my family is sleeping. Even my dad fell asleep with a chair in front of the locked door. I can hear rain outside, assuming it is the rain. It's coming from the window. I look outside and see nothing. I can hear cans falling from the direction of the garage. Dad's now on high alert, locked and loaded still. My brothers wake up crying. "I forgot to lock the garage!" My dad calls out. Dad hands me the SKS and tells me that he'll lead. We slowly walk the length of the house to the garage. I can hear movement in the garage. Sounded like cans are being thrown about. Dad reached for the door handle and quietly unlocked the door. Here we go, I thought. He opened the door right as lightning flashed. The door swings open. The garage is lit up. Dad flicks on the lights. And it was the wind. It had blown the door open, scattering cans around the garage. Thank God, I thought. I go to close the door, looking outside and seeing something run past the door about 100 feet away as another bolt of lightning flashes. I close the garage door and tell my dad. I start hearing a soft buzzing, followed by slamming at the garage door. Then I hear my brother screaming from across the house. The 2 of us run towards them as we lock both garage doors. Running back to the office, something is slamming on the window. We tell everyone to get out, and we all run toward the master bathroom with a walk-in closet with all our things. The banging goes on for another hour in various places throughout the outside of the house. Doors, windows, and walls, until all we hear is the rain and distant thunder. We patrol the house and wait until the sunrise. After that, we peek outside, but nothing is there, just a dreary morning. We walk the perimeter of the house, finding little footprints. Later on, we prepare to cook breakfast. My brothers wake up scared. We reassure them and tell them it's okay. Dad says not to tell Mom, that we'll make sure the house is safe. Even so, fear consumes the house for the next few weeks. But nothing happens and school begins and all is well. Fast forward 2 years to when I was 16 and edgy. I was working on the property and feeding the cows. There were multiple cows out in the pasture. It must have been 10 a.m. in the morning. I had my SKS slung on my back, and I noticed a group of cows standing by a creek bed, mooing like they're lamenting something. I walk over. Smells like a hospital and rotting flesh. I found 3 mutilated cows and a calf fetus still with the umbilical cord attached, floating in the creek. I run back to the John Deere Gator and call my dad on the walkie, telling him to call the sheriff and to come here. An hour later, deputies were taking pictures, and the coroner looked confused. A Crown Vic rolls up, and a few guys in slacks and button-up shirts walk up. They identify themselves as Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation. They start checking things out, then they call a college vet to come pick up the bodies for further research. After that, they drive off with the cattle bodies, and we go on our way. That night, I have to stay up and patrol the property on an ATV, making sure nothing goes wrong, while my dad keeps an eye out at home by the walkie in case I call for help. At around 10 p.m., while on the ATV down a dirt road, I heard a car rolling down the road. It's an all-black Crown Vic. As they drive by, I noticed 2 men in all black in the front. They stare at me as I wave at them as I pass. I go about a mile down the dirt road and hear a buzz, just like the one I heard 2 years before. The hairs on my neck stand up, and I see something slowly move across the sky, hovering over a house down the road, then moving on before shooting all the way up. I sit there in awe for 10 minutes. Then I can hear jets in the distance. 2 jets fly over me, probably from the Air National Guard base in Tulsa. They make 2 or 3 passes. I drive on, and for the rest of the night I see and hear nothing. I spend the rest of my weekend with no issues, then go to school on Monday. Back at school, everyone has seen this black triangle and knows what happened at our ranch. People are saying it's a common occurrence, but the Air Force and the feds are keeping it quiet. Another year goes by. I'm 17 and I'm getting ready to graduate high school. I'm preparing to enter the Oklahoma National Guard. I'm still working at the ranch and keeping an eye out for odd things. Late one evening, I'm driving my beat-up 1986 Silverado with my girlfriend, who's the stereotypical 90s goth girl. We're listening to Pantera on an Oklahoma back road, being edgy and different. We stop at an isolated part of my family's ranch and start a bonfire, pulling out a 12-pack of Lone Star beer. We drink some and eventually get drunk. We're looking up at the stars at one point while the fire dies. Suddenly, I hear buzzing, but I'm able to ignore it. "Hey, do you hear that?" asks my girlfriend. "Yeah." She looks at me. "I hear it all the time at my house. I think it's just the electricity from the power lines." "Is that right?" Then, the stars black out over us in the shape of a triangle. She starts screaming. The 2 of us run back to the cab of the truck. I struggle to get it started. I turn the engine over a few times until it finally starts. We begin to haul tail towards the road. We bust through a barbed wire fence. I look in my rearview mirror, and I see the triangle slowly following us. We keep hauling it down this country road, trying to get to the highway to be around other cars. A storm is following behind the triangle. Only a mile left till the highway. My girlfriend's screaming for me to go faster. It begins to rain hard. I push my truck to the limit. I see a bridge, and I have to cross it, but it's flooded. I tell my girlfriend to hang on, making a sharp left turn into a field and checking my rearview mirror. The triangle is still following us. Making a sharp right turn back onto the road, I can see the highway. I feel relieved. We get on the highway and keep hauling it. Eventually, I see blue and red lights on the other side of the highway. Cars on the other side of the road are stopped, and people are staring in bewilderment at this triangle. I cut through the median toward a few stopped sheriff cars. They're in awe too. The craft stops and hits a crazy amount of speed, flying right off. The deputy looks at me and says, "Hey, you're Deputy Anon's son, right?" "Yeah." "Was that thing chasing you?" "Sure seemed like it." "Holy crap, kid. From where?" "Near Ramona." "That's like 6 miles, kid." I was still in shock, my girlfriend still crying. I drop her off at her house in the shadow of a mesa in a trailer park, a poor rural area. Then I drive home, and my dad has been told that I had been chased. He listens and tells me I did the right thing. At school the next day, that's all people can talk about. I go on to graduate high school, and I do get into the National Guard. Fast forward to 2003 when I get home from Iraq, I start going to college, working part-time as a corrections officer at the local jail. I gotta say, when I got home from Iraq, the world was a different place. I start my part-time job at the sheriff's. Soon enough I get moved from the jail to patrol. That's awesome. I'm having a typical boring evening shift one day, sitting in my patrol car listening to classic rock. Eric Clapton, to be specific. Dispatch calls in. 843, we have a call about a person hanging around a ranch. I answer the call. It's probably just a bored kid wandering around someone's property. It starts to rain on the way there. I get to the residence and put on my raincoat. Stupid call, I tell myself. I walk to the house and knock on the door. "Sheriff's Department." The door cracks open. "Is near the barn. Short little fella. Probably a kid that's wandered onto my property," the homeowner says to me. Alright then, it's gonna be an easy call, I thought. I can hear thunder in the distance, and I can hear some AC/DC coming from my car subtly. I walk toward the barn, my radio starting to squeak and get choppy. Stupid rain, I tell myself. I can hear footsteps near the barn. "Hey kid, it's the sheriff's department. I'm gonna need you to come with me so we can take you home." The footsteps stop. "Hello? Kid, it's the sheriff's department." I walk around the side where I hear the stepping and pull out my mag light because the sun is going down fast and the rain is picking up. Huge black eyes reflect back at me. My eyes are watering, my head buzzing. My radio is making a moaning sound. I hear it walking towards me. I pull out my 1911 and pull the hammer back with all my strength. "You missed with that stick. You're going to miss with that." A voice rings in my head. I put my head down. The buzzing stops. When I look back up, nothing's there. I put the hammer back on my 1911 and my radio is back to normal chatter. 843? 843? We have reports of a large triangle near your call. Are you okay? 843. I'm okay. I get back on the radio. Dispatch is going crazy. They'd apparently been trying to call me for 5 minutes. I simply tell them my radio went to crap because of the storms. Dispatch then tells me to cancel officer non-responding call. I hear like 5 patrol cars rolling down the road to my position with sirens and lights. I walk back to the house and tell the homeowner it was just a deer. All my coworkers are worried as they turn around and drive back. Dispatch then comes in with a civil disturbance at a certain address. I tell them I'm on it. I drive 7 miles to my next call. I get to the call, and it's a familiar place, where my girlfriend from high school lived with her parents back in the day. I knocked on the door and I could hear yelling. The door opens. It's her mom. "Oh hey, Anon. Someone put you in a deputy outfit, or did they think you were sane enough to be a cop?" "Ma'am, now's not the time." She told me her daughter, my ex, was having violent fits and outbursts. I walk towards her room in the trailer and hear yelling and screaming. I open the door and see her thrashing on the ground. I lower myself and try to calm her. "Anon, they know who you are." she says to me. Who?
They do. The things. We saw the triangle and they are trying to get you with me.
I looked over at her mom, and she told me that she was diagnosed with bipolar depression last year. What do you want to do, ma'am? I asked her. Please take her to the hospital. Maybe a few weeks in a padded cell will help her. I call dispatch. I handcuff her and put her in the back of my squad car, beginning to drive her to Bartlesville, the nearest city. She's talking to me and telling me that they know my younger brothers are my weakness. My radio was going off with reports of multiple F-16s flying over the area, and a black triangle showing up after they RTB, then they scramble them again. Eventually, we make it to the hospital. I leave her there and continue on with my shifts for the next few weeks. I get a phone call at 3 a.m. 4 weeks later. Hey, Anon. Your ex-girlfriend hung herself in the hospital. She left a note saying that you were being watched and that they are after you. It seems everyone but me is able to laugh off the event. I tell my father, and he looks at me. Son, they're here every night outside, and your stepmom is in denial. My dad is literally sleeping 4 hours a night, walking the house when he is up at night, and my stepmom is taking Xanax and working her rounds at the local rural healthcare clinic like nothing is happening. Fast forward 2 years, I'm finished with my associate's degree, and I'm working full-time at the sheriff's department as a corporal. No weird happenings lately. One day during someone's shift, they called me and told me they found a girl that had been missing. She wasn't wearing any clothes, and she was found in the woods, rocking back and forth. She had been missing for a week, and was found by a few hunters. This girl was talking about big eyes and gray little men. Investigators are treating this as an assault, as they see signs of certain activity and other bruises. She was taken to the hospital, where Homeland Security took over, taking us off the case. Homeland Security goes to our headquarters and starts taking reports and evidence from every call about cattle mutilations and black triangles and odd sightings. They then tell us that all future calls need to be notified with the Homeland Security office in Oklahoma City. A fight breaks out between feds and sheriff's deputies in the motor pool. Someone keeps screaming Patriot Act, Patriot Act. As the fight goes on, one of the feds pulls a sidearm, making us stop and saying that if we continued like this, we would be stripped of our post certifications and blacklisted from policing for the rest of our lives. I end up falling into a deep depression, drinking about 8 to 12 cans of Lone Star every night, basically becoming a functioning alcoholic. I work my shifts, which is mainly just me dealing with druggies and domestics. One day around 2007, I was working the night shift. It was 1:30 a.m. I was chilling on a back road, taking a leak. Then, over the radio, I hear the piano exit of Layla. It was a nice, clear Oklahoma night, no worries. But then I hear a thumping in the distance. I've heard this before, digging deep in my memories. Thump, 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 thump. It's getting closer. That's a freaking Black Hawk helicopter. I get in the car and turn off the lights as it gets closer. It flies over. I leave all my lights off and begin to follow this helicopter. I follow it for about 20 minutes. The helicopter lands in a wooded opening near a nice new home. I couldn't help but think, what the heck? I see multiple black SUVs and a lone sheriff's car with the deputy sitting beside it, looking like he had been scolded by some Homeland uniformed officers. I turn on my driving lights and wait for the deputy to pull out so I can talk to him. The deputy comes out and I wave him down. He tells me to follow him. We drive about 2 miles away and make sure we're not followed. He tells me that he got a phone call from our lieutenant about a person peeping in the windows of a house, so he went to investigate. He told me he went to look, and about 5 minutes later, some DHS guys rolled up, and told him he had no jurisdiction on this case and detained him for a while. I connected the dots in my mind. DHS coming here in less than 5 minutes using a freaking helicopter. They must have a place that operates from in the county, and they'd have to be listening to our calls. I finish my shift and go to my dad. I tell him what I think. He says, yep, that's the issue. We're meddling in something they don't want us to know. I lay low for a few years and just be officer friendly. In 2010, I met a woman and married her. She worked as a general surgeon in Tulsa. I'm still bebopping around my sheriff job wearing my khakis and my cowboy hat. Working my beat, it's raining, and I'm thinking about quitting this job and moving to Tulsa, working the urban beat. Sitting at a railroad track while In Bloom by Nirvana comes on, I think back to being a teen, being reminded of my girlfriend who took her own life, and all the crazy moments. Dispatch to 843. This is 843? We have reports of a missing child, little girl following a fireball. It's around the 4th of July and fireworks are shot off a lot in the country. I put my Crown Vic in drive and make my way towards the address. I'm greeted by one of my younger brothers who is now a deputy. The mother of the little girl is there too. She's talking about how the whole house lit up and an orange ball shot through the house. The daughter started to follow it, which pointed her in the general direction of the forest. We tell her that we'll go into the woods once another deputy comes by, and is able to stay with her in case the child comes back. Soon the third deputy showed up, so my brother and I turn on our mag lights and walk into the forest. We walk about 300 feet into the woods, and our radios go nuts. My cell phone battery just dies on me as I try to make a call to dispatch. Screw it, I yell to my brother as we go deeper into the forest. I start hearing someone calling for help. It sounds like it's echoing, and I whisper to my brother, "Do you hear that?" Yeah. The thing about it wasn't a real voice. It was in our heads. Help. It sounds like a distorted child's voice. Our flashlights die. What the heck? These are fresh batteries. A scream blasts over the radio before it beeps that it's dead. Help. We both sit in the forest, waiting for our eyes to adjust to the dark. The voice continues to ring in our heads. I pull out my SIG 226. I whisper, "Let's move up." We move up about 200 feet and began to hear a soft buzzing. Then I hear real crying about 500 feet to my front. Someone calling out for help. I look to my left and my brother is right beside me. "Why'd you call out for help?" I ask him. "What? That wasn't me. Anon, I heard someone say your name." "Let's keep going," I whisper. We're getting closer to the crying. Soon we're right on top of it. Then we find the girl. She's lying in a dried creek bed. I jump in. She whispers to me, "They're watching us." "Hey, Anon, there's something up here." My brother calls from up above, "If you have to, just run." I call back. I can hear my brother booking it back to the tree line, and now in my mind I hear help and buzzing. I cannot climb out of the creek bed because it's about 10 feet up. I walk with one hand holding my pistol and the other holding the girl. I can hear leaves moving above the creek bed. "Is that you?" I called out to my brother, but there's only silence. Until I begin to hear a clicking noise. Something drops behind me. I turn around real fast. It was a rock. I turn again and hear the help. I start booking it to a place where I can run up the creek bed. Clicking sounds are falling behind me. I can still hear running behind me too. About 500 feet further, and I'm able to run up the creek bed. I begin to run towards the tree line. But then, an orange ball of light flies past me. I start to hear more running sounds in the front of me, and I can see 10 flashlights. I begin to run towards them. It's 10 deputies. Anon, come on! I'm running faster than I've ever run in my life. I reach the line with the deputies, and their lights begin to fail all at once, their radios beeping, and then the night goes completely dark. A humming goes over us, and an object blocks out the stars. 6 orange balls fly up towards the craft, and it speeds away right as 2 F-16s fly over. We all walk towards the squad cars and hear a helicopter on the horizon. It flies over and places a spotlight where we were. Then 3 DHS SUVs pull up. Blah blah Patriot Act blah blah. They have those little radioactivity detectors, and they beep when they scan us. They run towards the forest and begin looking. We go through SOP and make it home at 8 a.m. I crack open an ice cold RC Cola and rest, but only for a short time. In 2014, I'm living in a nice trailer in the country on my family's ranch, still working at the sheriff's department. My wife and I had 2 children, but she ended up leaving me for a banker in Oklahoma City. One night, I'm watching some crappy late-night variety show. I hear knocking at the window, but I didn't hear anyone drive up, so I grab my cig. I check the window and nothing's there. Then, the power goes out. Crap. I'd gotten some Gen 3 NVGs from the Federal Police Aid Program, and I kept them because we had no use for them. These are night vision goggles. I put them on, and my dark world turned green. I walked to my room and put on boots, finding a can silencer for my cig. I wanted this to end. Quietly, I make my way outside. It's eerily quiet. I check the perimeter. I change things up and go the other way. A knocking came from the other side of my trailer. I make my way quietly toward the other side. There he is. One of those grays trying to peek into my window. I call out, "Help me." The thing looks at me and screeches and begins to run off. I give chase, not thinking to fire at it for some reason. I'm just full of anger. These things have been messing with me for the past 20 years, and I'd rather have answers. But this thing can run. I sped up as I attempted to catch up to it. The creature begins to run towards the ranch house. I see the outside lights of the house as the hill comes into view, which is odd considering my trailer had no power. I run towards the creature and all of a sudden, it runs under security lights and blinds me. I take off my NVGs and try to readjust. I start to see spots in my vision. Soon it comes back, and I'm looking at the pool. The creature is looking back at me. I fill my pockets and fill a baton. I pull it out, and I walk towards the pool. If I lay one lick on you, you better never come back. Those empty, soulless eyes just stare back at me, and I hear buzzing. My nose now bleeding. I extend the baton and walk towards the creature. I swear, I land 2 blows on its head, and it lets out this blood-curdling scream. Then I kick it into the pool. I hear it struggling to keep above water as it slowly swims towards the stairs. I walk to the stairs, and I spit in its face. I land 1 good whack on its head again, then feel a burning in my body, and I hear a buzzing. The lights go out, and I can't move. 4 of the creatures show up and drag the wounded one away. The craft flies off, and I collapse on my baton. I hear my dad running down the steps. "Anon, are you okay?" "Yeah." I walk home, and I go to sleep. I'm writing this all down now in 2016. I'm remarried and still working at the sheriff's, and we've had no odd cases reported in 2 years.